I had the great experience of meeting Elvis when I was like 17 years old in San Antonio, Texas, April 15th, 1956. And this happened to me because I had the honor to be the first fan club president of any size that had ever been formed for Elvis. And that was quite by accident. Happened when a top radio station announced my address over the radio and said that there was an Elvis Presley fan club, and it was a joke. And I went out and got all this mail out of my mailbox. Everybody wanted to join the Elvis Presley fan club. Well, there was no Elvis Presley fan club, but there were hundreds of letters. This was early on when Elvis was playing Texas. I was in Dallas, Texas, and he played all around Texas in all these little towns because he wasn't real popular in Memphis and Tennessee because he was too rock and roll and they wanted hillbilly. So he says a lot of times that if it wasn't for Texas, he wouldn't even had a career. And I guess it's meaningful that his main fan club came out of Texas. And I was just the right person at the right time. My aunt was the secretary at KLIF to the president, and I was there, and the disc jockey came in making fun of Elvis Presley, this stupid guy, this crazy record. And I had already heard him on the Big D Jamboree on the radio. But I said, oh, he's going to be a great hit. And the guy was laughing, and I said, well, he is. And I said, I even have a fan club for him. Well, I had two sisters, so that was sort of true. And it was like, he said, oh, you do? And I said, yeah, I do. And so apparently he got my address from my Aunt Billy and announced it on his show, at KLIF, which is a top radio station. And then I got all this mail wanting to join the fan club. So I contacted, I had found a Sun Records promotional poster in the Melody Record Shop in downtown Dallas. It had I still got it, by the way. And you gotta love him if you still got a poster from that far away. But at any rate, I saw an address on there, and it was Bob Neal was his manager at that time. So I wrote Bob Neal, and I said, I need a fan club. I've got all these people, and they need cards, and they need pictures. And so I get this letter back from a secretary. It says, Bob Neal is no longer managing. He's been turned over to Tom Parker. You know, it was from Colonel Tom Parker's big office thing. And said, we don't have any facilities for Elvis for a fan club. He's just one of the new smaller attractions that Colonel Parker has. He just got him. It called him an attraction. And, you know, he has Hank Snow and the Carter sisters. And it was like Elvis was just this little side guy. So she said, the Colonel told you to do just anything you want regarding a fan club for Elvis. And I said, and I thought, well, that's very nice. And so I wrote her back and I said, okay. I said, what do I do? I mean, I asked my mom, what do you do? She said, well, you know, she said, the big thing about a fan club is that sometimes the fan club presidents get to meet the guy. And she says, I remember back when Frank Sinatra said that, you know, the fan club presidents always got to meet the guy. And I said, oh, you're kidding. I said, well, I have a fan club right now. So, you know, I went out and I designed the Presley Pink fan club card, which now is in Graceland. And the first one is, you know, and had it printed. And answered all the letters. There was like several hundred of them. And I wrote back to Colonel Parker's office and said I've started the club and blah, 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 and printed the cards. So after a while, about a month later, I got another letter from Parker's office and said, Elvis is going to be in San Antonio on April the 15th. Would you like to go down there and meet him? I said, that's it. This is the dream has come true, the fulfillment of the dream. So San Antonio was like over 200 miles from Dallas, but they didn't know that in Memphis, so they thought it was right down the road. And I said, oh, I'd love to do it. Set me up. What do I need to do? So they sent me a telegram from Colonel Parker that said, this is Kay Wheeler, and allow her backstage at the Municipal Auditorium in San Antonio. So I got on a great, I happened to have a friend that lived down in San Antonio, because I had lived there as a child, and I had like an old childhood girlfriend there that I could stay with her parents and her. My mother allowed me, so I got on a Greyhound bus, my white spike heels and my beige sheath dress, and I rolled down there to see Elvis all by myself. And that's why I like the song "Trying to Get to You." It's one of my favorites because that's the way I was feeling as I was rolling down the highway on that Greyhound bus. I thought, I'm really doing this, right? I had my telegram from Colonel Parker. It was like the magic key, you know. And so I go to the place where the auditorium is, and there's zillions of kids there, and I walk up to some policeman or somebody by the gate, and I said, I need to get in, here's my telegram. It was like, it was a magic key. It got me through every single door. And so I got into the auditorium, and then there was Tom Diskin, who was Elvis's road manager and Colonel Parker's right-hand man. And by the way, a very gentleman, a very nice person. And I said, I'm Kay Wheeler, and I have the fan club in Dallas. And they knew who I was. And he said, oh, okay. He said, well, Elvis is in there. Go right on in. It was like a, you know, a dressing room. I said, just go right on in. Go right in. I said, boy, I don't know if I can do this or not. I think I was more like 16. Oh, no, I wasn't. I was 16, I think. And my heart was beating 1,000 miles an hour. So I go in and I open the door, and he's sitting there in front of a mirror adjusting his ducktail. Okay, he's doing his hair. And when I walk in, we're the only ones in the room. He spins around, and he turns around and looks at me, and he says, I said, I'm Kay Wheeler. I'm the president of your fan club. And I mean, I was like protecting myself, okay, because I didn't know what he was going to do. So he walks up to me, and he looks at me up and down, and he takes his hand, he runs his hand down, up and down the sides of me. He says, baby, is that all you? And I'm about to pass out at that time, and I say, yes. And, you know, and then, you know, he just kind of, you know, starts kissing around on me and everything, and I'm starting to freak out because I'm this very gentle, frightened to death teenager. And so we had a really good time in there, and he says, well, what do you want me to do? And I had some pictures. I said, sign them. You know, I wanted him to autograph some things for me, and so he signed some pictures for me. And, you know, we just started, you know, kind of hugging around and kissing around on me, and I'm thinking, I'm going to pass out. You know, that song, all I could do was stand there paralyzed. I mean, I was just paralyzed, and I just couldn't get into it because I was too frightened. So then the press came in and knocked on the door and, you know, kind of interrupted the whole thing. But that was my first meeting with Elvis, never to be forgotten. In fact, here's one of the pictures of him. Here's one of the pictures of him at that time. That was taken that very day, so you can just see that we were just having a ball. And, you know, he was definitely getting away with holy murder there, you know. But this is a never to be forgotten moment, and we had some great times. I danced while he was during the break, while he was up on stage, and when he came off, he said, show me some of those steps, let's dance. And so we did a little dancing there while Scotty Moore played the guitar. So we did a little rocking and bopping there, and a little bumping and grinding. So that was my first meeting with Elvis Presley. So about a little bit later, then the press came in and kind of interrupted everything. And so meanwhile, while he was talking with the reporters, he kept his arms around me and, you know, was pointing and giving them directions and saying, shoot it over here and move over there. And we were just together during that whole scene. And when they asked him, he said, are you going to get married, Elvis? And he squeezed me real tight. He said, why buy a cow when you can milk it through a fence? Well, that sounded horrible to me. And I just got froze up, you know, right there on the spot. And so later when he went on the show, I was dancing in the wings while he was out there on stage, and he came off and he said, let me see what you were doing there, because I was doing some of my crazy wild and rock and roll, rock and bop. And so he said, show me how to do that. And so we did. We danced some, and Scotty Moore played the guitar for us, and we did a little dance scene there. And that was in San Antonio in 1956. And what a great way to meet Elvis. Does it get any better? In his early days, he did a lot of leg shaking, you know, just mostly leg shaking and leaning back. Part of the rock and bop that I have is the heel-toe thing, and a little bit more swinging out the legs. And we did that, and that's what I showed him. But I saw later on it was incorporated, whether he saw it on somebody else or whether that made the impact, who would know? I have no way of knowing that. But I did get a chance to dance with him and at least show him a couple of those rock and bop steps. And he got a little bit more elaborate in his dancing, and I don't know where he got that from, Jackie Wilson or some great black singer or somebody. I wouldn't take the credit for that, but I did expose him to what I do on my dance steps. One of the great things about having a mother like my mom was that she was an artist, and she was very open, and when I wanted to have the fan club for Elvis, she thought it was a fun thing. where a lot of parents were totally freaking out about having Elvis Presley in their lives. They thought this was the end of their children. You don't realize that rock and roll was like marijuana or drugs or something horrible. I mean, the parents in the 50s were terrified that their kids were dancing to rock and roll. Terrified. They considered it the black music. This was a nightmare. And Elvis was the biggest nightmare of all because he was white and he was bringing it to everybody. But what made me very lucky was that my mom was so open, and she said, oh, this is a great idea. And so I probably couldn't have ever done any of this if I hadn't had a mother that was at least somewhat understanding. And she really loved Elvis, and she got to meet Elvis at the Cotton Bowl and backstage at the press conference. And she also was an art teacher, and she decided that she wanted to paint an all portrait of Elvis, and she did that in 1956. He was not real big, not huge, big mega star, and nobody knew whether he was going to last for 6 months. People would say, this Elvis Presley, he's going to last a good 6 months. So my mom did a portrait of him, and we presented it to him at the press conference at the Cotton Bowl in Dallas, Texas, October 11th, 1956. And she was there, and everybody was leaving, and she said, I didn't get to meet Elvis. And Parker said, come on, Elvis, time to go. And I said to Elvis, I said, Elvis, my mom wants to, she didn't get to meet you, you know, and we presented the portrait. And he said, well, never mind, wait a minute, hold everything. I'm going to meet Kay's mama. And he came over there and talked to her and gave her an autograph. And that was just the thrill of her lifetime. And she was just a cool mom. And I never had to rebel or do anything because she was kind of like, say, if you just keep yourself good and okay and take care of yourself, I'm going to let you have some fun. So I didn't have to go underground. And I always told her everything, and she always knew what was going on. And that was my mom. Her name is Vivian, and she was just wonderful. And she still inspires me, even though she's not here anymore. At the same time, he was making Jailhouse Rock, and I was making Hot Rod Gang. Just how crazy can life be? And none of it was planned. None of it was planned. It was just happened out there. And then Rock Baby Rocket is now in the history books when they start talking about the beginning of rock and roll and films and all that. That movie, Rock Baby Rocket, that little movie I made, is considered the prototype movie of the 1950s for teenagers. So I thought that was kind of wild, and then my picture's in the history book there. It's kind of exciting. I never thought I was going to make history. I don't know if that's a good way to make history or not. To be the prime juvenile delinquent at the time. Actually, when I was there with Elvis in San Antonio, I said, well, when you come to Dallas? He said, well, I can't, but Colonel says Dallas is too big. We can't get a booking there, but we're going to play Fort Worth. I said, Fort Worth? I said, you know, you've got to come to Dallas. And he said, oh no, well, Parker says we can't do it, we can't do it. I said, well, we'll see about that. And that was, so I came back to Dallas and asked my Aunt Billy, who worked at KLIF, radio station KLIF in Dallas. I said, how come we can't get Elvis in Dallas? She said, well, maybe if you had a ride-in campaign with all your fan club members, maybe we could get him here. Maybe if enough kids ride in and, you know, KLIF to the radio station. I said, well, we're going to do it. So we had a huge write-in campaign, and Gordon McClendon at radio station KLIF in Dallas, Texas, booked Elvis for, and they sold so many tickets, they had to book the Cotton Bowl because there was no place to put as many tickets as they had sold. So we were playing the Cotton Bowl. So this is when the press conference that my mother, you know, we gave him the portrait, and we had some great times with him. And so they had this huge cyclone fence in front of all the people sitting in the Cotton Bowl so that they couldn't go out on the field. And Elvis, they had a stage right out in the middle of the football field with Elvis, you know, Scotty and BJ Fontana and his whole band. And I was the only teenager. Elvis said, bring her out on the field. I was the only teenager allowed on the field. There were some photographers out there. And there's a picture of that to this day, the State Fair of Texas. That was a big thrill because he jumped off the thing and was saying, you know, that's all right, little mama. And I was right there freaking out on the grass. He jumped down on the grass off the stage and on the ground. So that was a great thrill. I mean, I was like a 17, 16-year-old kid just having the time of her life, you know, and never to be forgotten. I think of all the girls, and there were always zillions of them throwing their bodies at him, I think the thing that may have attracted him to me was that I was not one of them. I really didn't want to get into that mess. And he even said to me, honey, you're too smart for your own good. And I think that made him more interested in me a little bit, because I was a little more of a challenge. It's kind of like if everybody's just throwing ice cream at you, you might want to try some lasagna, you know what I mean? So he invited me down to the Louisiana Hayride, and I needed to start a fan club down there anyway, and there was a girl that wanted to do it, and so I gave my mother an excuse. So I take a night train down to Shreveport by myself, you know, wild and crazy girl. And so, you know, he sees me at the conference, at the press conference there, and so he tells Cliff Cleves to take me up to a hotel room and have me wait there for him. And so I just didn't, Cliff Cleves didn't tell me that. He said, just come with me, Elvis wants you to go somewhere. I said, oh, okay. So I walk up there, and he opens the door, and there's this room, and there's, you know, the big bed and all that. And he said, just wait here. And I said, okay. So I'm sitting there, and the more I'm sitting there and waiting, the more I feel like this is something I'm not going to be able to do. The more I started to figure it out. So I waited there about 10 or 15 minutes, and everything my mother had ever taught me started rolling through my mind. I'm thinking, you know, Mom would not like this, and I'm letting her down. She trusts me to go off to Shreveport, Louisiana to meet Elvis Presley, to be with Elvis. How dangerous is that? And here I am sitting here, and I know better than this. So after talking with myself, you know, at least 15 minutes, I jumped out of the chair and ran out in the hallway. And I saw some of Elvis's guys standing out in front of another room, and I ran in there, and there Elvis was sitting there with them. They were laughing and cutting up, you know, with the Memphis Mafia. And so when he saw me, he said, Kay, come over here, you know, and the green coat that I love was sitting there on the bed. And he said, do you want a sandwich? And I said, no. And he said, well, we're ordering sandwiches, you know. And so I put on the green coat and, you know, kind of, you know, walked around the room a little bit. And then I decided, you know, again, I'm getting out of here. I'm leaving. You know, I'm not hanging around. So I just made a silent exit. And the first thing you know, I was going down the hallway. I went down to a stairwell, and Elvis was running after me. So he kind of cornered me in a stairwell. And so I wanted to have a serious conversation about life or something. You know, the last thing on my mind was probably what was on his mind. He wanted a little less conversation, a lot more action. And I said, you know, Elvis, I said, what do you think life is all about? Just hoping to get him off of some other talk, get him off of the thing that's always on his mind. And so he just grabs me, throws me against the wall, starts grinding his pelvis on me and kissing me. And I'm thinking, this is just so crazy. I can't get into this right now. I was just so taken aback by it that I was just, you know, and a lot of women would say, you should have just gone crazy at that point. But I think that who I am and who he kind of knew who I was, that was real inappropriate for me. And so I kind of just endured it for a while and just kind of didn't participate. But it seemed like he was trying to put on some kind of a show there with me. And I don't know if any other girls have ever said this, but I actually had a private Elvis the Pelvis routine and kissed me at the same time. And of course, when Elvis disappears for any length of time, all of a sudden we hear screaming down the hall, Elvis, Elvis, where's Elvis? You know. And so one guy peeks around down there and he says, oh, here he is. And he says, come on, Kay, let's go get, he said, the sandwiches are here. I said, let's go. So I let him rush off with them, and I quietly went to the elevator and went downstairs to the Captain Shreve and got a cab and got out of there. And as I walked down there, I thought, you know, I felt a certain amount of empowerment, because really I had just walked out on, you know, maybe some people might think that's stupid, but all these crazy girls were coming down the hall, you know, Elvis, Floosy. And so I just walked out of there and left. So that's my story about the Shreveport, Louisiana Hayride. That was December 15th, 1956. That was his last appearance at the Hayride, and one to be always remembered with me. When all this Elvis and Gene Vincent and Hollywood and movies and everything kind of came to an end, I met a guy in Hollywood and got married, was married at 18. And I came home, and we came back to Dallas, and he was from South America, you know, had all the accent and all that stuff, and looked like Rudolph Valentino. That helped. But still, I was just a frivolous young person, and, you know, superficial, didn't really understand substance and that kind of thing, just a kid. And so I had a son, and we were married 2 years, and I had a son, Rick, and just sort of went back to college and just wanted to really know who I was, because I wasn't rock and roll hoochie coo. I wasn't just by the time I was 19, I'd lived all this stuff and made 2 movies and Elvis and all that. That was a lot for a teenage girl. And so I wanted to know what was life really all about and substance. And I got real serious and studied law for 2 years, and thought didn't want to talk about Elvis. This was like, oh no, this is going to ruin my future. I thought, what I've done here is going to ruin my future. But my mother always just thought it was the greatest thing. So it was in the 70s or 80s that a book came out that all of a sudden I was pictured with Elvis. One of these pictures was in some big book that was a New York Times bestseller. And it had, Kay Wheeler with Elvis and his early career, blah, blah. It was one of those ones that I just showed earlier. And my mom wrote this author in England and said, she corrected him with some detail. So my mother said, this guy says he wants to write a book about you. And I said, Mother, I never want to talk about this rock and roll stuff. I said, it was frivolous. It's over. I've got a serious career. I want to write. I want to, maybe practice law. And this rock and roll stuff just doesn't fit with my profile, or my resume. And she said, well, keep the letter. She said, maybe someday. So when my mother passed away, I found the letter, and it had the guy's address and phone number. So I said, she wanted me to do this. She wanted me to write my story about rock and roll and Elvis and the beginning of rock and roll and the movies I made and all the fun and growing up in Texas and what it was like to be there in those times. And I thought, I'm just going to call this guy. So, with all the audacity of Kay Wheeler, I call this guy, and he answers the phone. He said, this is Alan Harbinson. And I said, hi, this is Kay Wheeler. I said, you wrote my mother a few years ago, and you did a book on Elvis. You mentioned something, you might be interested in doing a book with me. I said, so let's get together and do it. And so he said, that's a great idea. I'm going to be coming to the United States, and I'd like to see you. So we did, together with Alan Harbinson, we wrote a book called Growing Up with a Memphis Flash, which is the story of growing up in Texas, and it's how Elvis and his life, intertwined and influenced my life. And Gene Vincent's in here, and the whole story, the whole saga of the great times in the 50s. And my mother hooked that up, so she had a great impact on my life, and we're still talking about it. I had the great privilege of meeting Gladys Presley in November of 1956 at Elvis's house at 1034 Audubon Drive in Memphis, Tennessee. The thing I noticed about her was she was in a extreme case of melancholy and sadness, and just seemed like she almost could have a premonition of what was going to happen to Elvis. She seemed very, very concerned, and she was real nice to me, and said something, you remind me of myself when I was a girl, and we had some little camaraderie there, and she took me through the whole house and was going to give me Elvis's white buckskin shoes, which at the time I thought, how am I going to get those in a suitcase? They're going to get everything dirty. And now they're under a glass case in Graceland, and worth probably, $500,000. But she was really, really sweet to me, and I felt like that she really had a real deep feeling that there was tragedy headed their way. And so I think she was really right on that, and unfortunately. But it's very few people that really had an interview with her that are still alive and talking about it. So that was a nice time. The last time I saw Elvis was at the press premiere of Jailhouse Rock in Hollywood, California. And I was there, and he walks into the room, and he really looks different. He doesn't look like the Memphis Flash, which was, all flashy and full of pizzazz. He had kind of a square-looking suit, and he looked lonely. And there was a room with probably about 75 people there, and he scanned the whole room, and he sees me way in the back, and everybody's sitting there waiting for him to say something, right? And he yells out as loud as he can, "Is that you, Kay?" Everybody turns around and looks at me. And I said, "Yes, it's me, Elvis. Hi." And so, this was our moment. And that was the goodbye. That was goodbye. And I felt like the way he was so anxious to see somebody from home and somebody that he knew from the old days, And then he got caught up in the Hezbollah. And, I had an appointment later with my husband-to-be. So I scooted out of there. But that was the last time I ever saw Elvis in Jailhouse Rock press premiere in Hollywood. And I believe, I don't know when that was, 58 or 57, probably 57, thinking it was 57. A great time. I want to say this, and this may sound extremely corny from Miss Rock and Bob, but I think that God has really helped me through all this. And I have to say that with a real genuine heart, because I think that I have had a lot of blessings and a positive outlook. And I've never, done drugs or alcohol or any of those things that a lot of people end up really being hurt by. And I'm thankful for that. And I think that's a message. This is a message from an early rocker that's a positive message. I think that rock and roll is a great thing, and it's a great, wonderful beat and a lot of fun. And heaven knows I had a lot of fun with it. But I think that's not the whole substance of our lives, that there's a lot more. When we start talking about Elvis, there's so much to say. And we can't do it all at one time, but you can find out more if you want to go to my website. It's www.kwheeler.com, and you can see the whole panorama and even watch me dancing in Rock Baby Rocket. So I hope you would meet me there, okay?
I walked across this country, I walked across this land, across so many rivers I don't even understand. It's the whole baby. Hold, baby, hold your hand. I ain't gonna come out here no more, gonna get myself in hand. I walked across this river and I ran across this town. I hope you come on back to me, ain't on solid ground, baby. I want my partner just to hold your hand. Baby, I just did something, I just wanna rock instead. I don't wanna fight, I don't wanna fight, I just wanna rock instead.